Lights, am I right? Start by deleting the default cube. Add a sphere and make it really low res. Then use a subdivision surface modifier to make it high res again. Extrude this sphere until it looks something like a light bulb. Then toggle X-ray and add a solidify modifier. This should make our glass actually look right. Speaking of glass, open the shader panel and create a glass material by sliding up the transmission and the roughness down. When we preview this with an HDRI, it should look like glass. Select some bottom vertices and put the cursor to selected. This will start our filament in the right spot. For this filament, add a plane and rotate it, then scale and move elements until it semi-resembles the shape of the filament. Delete the bottom edge and subdivide the side edges to make every edge about the same length. Hide the bulb and open a new Geometry Nodes editor on the filament object. Start by adding a subdivision surface node, then before that a subdivide mesh node, and after that a mesh to curve node. After the mesh to curve node, add a curve to mesh node and then another subdivision surface node. Next, make your mesh into a curve and your curve into a mesh one more time. I swear this is the last time. Add a set material node for later and add a curve circle for the profile curve input on the last curve to mesh node. Make the radius smaller and the resolution really low. Next, add a set position node in between the first mesh to curve to mesh nodes. Add a noise texture and a map range node, but change the map range node from float to vector. Make sure to use the color output on the noise texture node for the vector input on the map range node because they both have 3 different values. And change the 2min to -0.5 and the 2max to 0.5 to normalize it. Change the noise texture from 3D to 4D, but you'll notice that the offset is still too high. To fix this, add a vector math node, change it to multiply, and change all the values to 0.1. You'll notice that something funky is happening though. The bottom of the filament is being offset along with the top of the filament, and we don't want that to happen. To fix this, drag out the selection input from the set position node to a not boolean math, and plug that to an endpoint selection. Increasing the start size and end size values will make it so that less vertices are being offset on our filament. Plug the W input from the noise texture into the group input, and rename it to something like random. Next, put another multiply vector math node behind the other one, and add another math node next to the curve circle. Drag the multiply vector math node to the group input, name this input scale. Drag this input out into a separate XYZ node, and plug the X value into the multiplier for the curve circle scale. Make sure to put your desired input at the top. In the modifiers panel, set the scale to all be 1. Now that we have the filament done, let's distribute these light bulbs onto other mesh. Start by adding a plane and giving it a Geometry Nodes modifier. You can name this one Lights Distribute. While we're at it, rename the other one to be Filament. In the Lights Distribute, convert the mesh to points and instance the light bulbs onto those points. Add a Scale Instances node and plug it into a Combine XYZ node. Drag this to the group input and name it Scale. Set it to 1 as default and drag it into all the X, Y, and Z on this Combine node. Add a Join Geometry node after the Scale node for the future. Then drag out the Mesh to Points to another Instance on Points node. This one's going to be for the filament. After the Instance on Points node, add a Rotate Instances node and plug the rotation into a random node. Change the maximum Z value to be 2 times pi and all the other values to be 0. After that, add a Scale Instances node using the same vector input as the other Scale Instances node. Realize your instances and then add your filament node group from before. Make sure to plug the Combine XYZ node into the scale. Then add this to the Join Geometry node at the very end. If the position is off like shown, make sure the origins of your filament and light bulb are set to the same position. Also make sure that your filament geometry nodes are removed from the instanced filament mesh. Now add your text object and give it a font you like. Type out your text to say something you like because from now on we'll be working in a destructive workflow. Delete all but one vertex on your instance plane and move this vertex to be where you want it on the text. Change the scale of the lights so that they're small enough that a wall outside the text won't clip into them. Now spend a lot of time extruding this vertice out to fill in the text. You're going to have to do this manually for every single letter. Once you're done, make sure the light bulb height is correct by moving them up and down a little bit, and then convert your text object into mesh. In edit mode, select all the faces, hit delete limited dissolve. This will make it easier for us to inset these faces. After they've been inset, select the outer bits and extrude them upwards. Now for our filament material. On our filament object, make a new material, name it filament, give it a sort of gray color, and connect a black body node into the emission color. The input for the black body node will be a map range node that goes from minimum of 2000 to a maximum of around 4000. The value input for this will be the random per island output on the geometry input node. Set the emission strength to 10 and apply it inside our geometry nodes, and boom! There you have it. VFX it onto some practical walls and you've basically got a movie. Subscribe for more.